And the first presentation, you would see the process, and a lot of questions get answered in the first presentation because there are very similar issues that come in up over and over again at each school, because if salaries are up or benefits are up, we say it in the first one and answer questions, and then usually it goes quicker along the way. So again, happy to have you listen to all of them, but it might help you to catch up if you listen, especially that overview and the beginning and the end will kind of give the bigger picture information.
Right, and it was helpful that each of the schools presented their budget in the same format. So if you listen to the first one, the others are comparable in terms of the information, especially if you have the handouts. Now we're
Thank
ready.
you, John.
Okay.
I'm at page 6.
You don't have a page 6?
No. Or page 2 or page 4.
Oh, no.
Whoops.
No, me neither.
Yeah. Every other one's listed.
So I'll make some
We have
copies.
odd numbers. We can take notes because we've got
You
the,
have them out, yeah.
Yeah.
And we can post the full one.
Again.
Sorry, John.
All right.
on that note.
This is on
Okay, so what you're going to see tonight, and you probably already heard from Tina and Stacy from your meeting last week, is that a lot of the budget lines have been realigned to meet DOE, more appropriate DOE accounting standards. And I don't believe anybody was as affected as much as me. And you're going to see that through the budget tonight. We have some very dramatic shifts from budget lines to other budget lines. And at this point, they are now more appropriately salaries and services are more appropriately billed to specific facilities where they actually belong. I'm going to highlight some of the ups and downs, and you'll see some of those dramatic shifts as we go from slide to slide. But I'd like for you to keep in mind that the operations budget, we still have some bidding that's going on and will be going on over the next couple months. So some of these numbers are still fluid and might fluctuate. So, don't carve these in stone just yet because we're not exactly there. So the biggest difference you're going to see from last year's budget to this year's budget is that a lot of the operations items existed in the superintendent's budget and the system-wide budget. And as we go through these, I'll show you where some of those have shifted from line to line. So let me tell you about our facilities. For those of you that are new and may not necessarily be familiar, we do operate 4 school buildings. And all the auxiliary structures that go along with those. That includes, like the snack shack and the field house at the high school, any of the outdoor storage buildings that are with our facilities. We operate the one central offices building off of Route 26, and we have the one single bay garage where we maintain all of our buses and our mechanics spend their day. We have one pre-K to 6 maintenance supervisor. That's Gary Purrington. Gary covers, he supervises all the maintenance staff for Minot, PCS, and Elm Street. And we have Tony Bennett, who is our high school, middle school maintenance supervisor here. And I have a total of 14 full-time and part-time custodial staff that work under them.
Quick question for the school. The high school and the middle school considered one building?
Structure only.
Structure only.
But they do have separate operating budgets, and,
Right. But it's
those are broken
one
down.
solid structure.
Yep.
Okay, yep.
And actually, that's going to be another big difference that you're going to see, because previously everything was billed to the high school, and that now has been broken out to equate for the middle school, their fair share of the funding allocations. So food service. We do operate a breakfast and lunch program, which is going through some, dramatic changes currently. We operate 4 full-service kitchens in each of our buildings. We have one part-time food service director who is new to the district as of the first of the year. We've decided to go from a full-time food service director to a part-time food service director. And in the short term, it looking like it's working out very well for us. We have 4 food service managers. These are the primary supervisors in each of our kitchens, and 8 full or part-time food service staff. We serve 688 on average breakfasts every day, and 994 lunches on average every day. And Tina wanted to talk about the 20,000.
So each year, we dedicate a certain amount of money to food service, and basically that covers any losses that we may have through the food service program. When I first came, there was $40,000 allocated to that line, and then when Mr. Wilhelm was the interim superintendent, they dropped that to 10 and really encouraged the food service director to make that self-sufficient. So food service is supposed to be a self-funding system. You know, create the food and you sell it, and it pays for the food. It doesn't always work that way, and we are very typical in the fact that usually there is additional costs that the district picks up. I think it was last year we decided to move that to $20,000 because $10,000 was not close to what we were paying. 3 years in a row, an audit showed it was about $30,000 that the district was putting back in. So we've raised it to $20,000, and again, working towards getting it to be about that much that we know that we'll probably contribute. And we're going to recommend that we keep that stable for the rest of this year. See how our revenues and expenditures go now that we have a part-time food service director and a little bit of a different structure within the department, and see if that is appropriate. And of course, if we still are finding it's around $30,000, probably in the future I'll recommend going to what actual is. But we are hoping to be more efficient and be able to get that down so it's closer to a self-sufficient system.
So a question on that 20,000, is that food cost related, labor cost? I mean, what is the makeup of that 20,000 that we're not covering? I mean, or not getting back in revenue?
So we do, I don't know that off the top of my head. I would say it's, you know, we do have staff working 6 hours a day and getting benefits. So it's probably staffing costs, and like with any other business, our staffing costs in education are typically around 80% of our budget. So I know that Stacy and I had conversations about, you know, the structure of the food service staff, and some schools they don't have them work 6 hours. They might have them work a few hours in the morning and a few hours in the afternoon, and there's some split, you know, in the middle. But at this point, we're comfortable keeping the structure that we have and just seeing if we can be more efficient in other ways.
And being, well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and being that we're swapping from a full-time director to a part-time, is that money going to still be allocated for the salary? I'm assuming that we're saving towards that 20,000, or is that going to be in addition to it?
So as we've said, it's been costing the district more than the 20,000. So we're assuming that that's going to reduce costs, and that 20,000 will be still necessary, and that will kind of offset some of the amount over.
Okay, thank you.
And is the breakfast program also what's contributing towards this loss, or is that separate?
Can you say that again?
Is the breakfast program contributing towards the loss, or is that separate?
Significantly.
It's
yes.
separate, okay.
Yes.
And that's why we're making the changes from the universal breakfast to
Paid.
having it be based on whether you qualify to have it free, or whether you have to pay a reduced cost or a full cost.
The food service budget is really independent from the school budget, and in the real world, the food service program will be self-supporting. So when we look at, you know, the 20,000 extra that we need, those are, you know, unintended or unanticipated expenses like equipment failures and things like that.
Sure.
There are school departments who have food service programs that, you know, generate enough income so that they can put money away each year into, you know, a reserve account to cover those expenses. We have not achieved that level at this point.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, William?
Well, I was kind of asked, I think partly of my question was, are there people that are falling off the radar that they don't really qualify, but they really can't afford it, and that we're picking up the tab for that so that the kids don't go hungry?
Certainly we have some families that do not qualify for a free lunch that struggle to pay for their lunch. I had a mother call me, concerned that we rejected her application. It's not us. It's, of course, the federal government decides who gets free lunch or not. We don't have a say in that. And she was sharing that, yes, they might have a salary income that matches what a free lunch, full paid lunch could pay, but they had serious medical catastrophe in their family, and their their salaries were going to pay bills, medical bills.
Sure.
And so they were really struggling to pay for their food bills. So I'm sure there are kids and families who struggle to pay for their meals. We don't decide that, and we do have some bills that are not being paid. And we're working on, getting those bills paid whenever possible. And,
We're not, I guess part of that is we're not letting a kid go hungry because of a parent's inability to pay, that the masses of people that generally can do that are picking up the tab for that and helping kids out.
yeah, every child gets a lunch.
Perfect.
Okay. So we do, like I said earlier, we have 4 buildings, but we actually have 5 building budgets, and I'm just going to kind of go through those for you now. The first one is our Poland Community School, and I know that you probably you don't have this page, and the numbers are there are kind of small. But these budget lines are going to be, almost identical from school building to school building. Of course, the numbers are going to change. So what you see there are all the operational expenses from salaries and benefits, all the way down from repairs to supplies, and any principal or interest that we still owe on any of our buildings from previous construction projects or improvements. The Poland Community School budget at this point is projected to be about $552,409, which is roughly a 16.14% increase over last year's budget. And this is where those adjustments kind of make up that 16%. Now, keep in mind that these numbers are still kind of rough, and really, in reality, I probably shouldn't have put the 16.14 because it almost sounds very specific, but that's not necessarily the case. The custodial salaries show an $8,000 increase, and those are just general salary raises in the next year. Our contracted professionals line is dropping about $38,000. We're going to see an increase of $8,500 in our waste removal, $2,500 increase in our snow removal. Our supplies line has been adjusted to the current actual, and that's a typo there. We actually do have a number in there. Heating fuel, we lowered by $15,000, and we still have some bond interest on one of the PCS additions, and that interest has lowered because the Maine Municipal Bond Bank periodically refinances their loans, and we get the benefit of any decreased discounts that are offered.
And is that bond on the PCS, is that the one that's gonna be done in 4 years? Is that one of them?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
On the PCS bond, isn't that reimbursed part of, is that for the addition out back where the music room and all that is?
Yes.
And isn't a lot of that reimbursed by the state?
We get federal subsidy for, no state participation in high school.
It was a locally funded project.
Well, when we built that, I think it was state funds, maybe federal state funds, that were paying for rental on portables. And the deal was if you got rid of the portables, the state was to reimburse you for a number of years if you built permanent spaces.
I was here when that was done, Norm, and I don't recall that, but we can certainly check into it.
That's what was supposed to have been. It's worth following up on, because it was a pretty good deal at the time. I can't remember exactly what it was. There was one way you could go, they reimbursed you for 5 years, another way it was 10. And used up a good part of those years anyway, but maybe we've gone beyond it. But we really ought to check it and see.
It hasn't been happening since I've been here. And so that would be 4 years now. I don't believe that. So I'm assuming if we were collecting it, somebody would know.
Yeah, you'd see where it's coming from, yeah.
But I think it's also been more than 10 years since that addition was done.
It
Oh,
could
yeah,
be,
that's-
yeah, because it was only, time
Yeah,
flies.
it would be a 20-year loan, and it's due in 2000. It's due to come due in 4 years, so it would be like 15 or 16
Yeah,
years.
see, we did that only a couple of years after we built this building, so
Yeah,
it's a lot
15
more
or
than
16
10, so
years.
that's probably
Yeah.
why,
Yeah.
okay.
So I just had a question on staffing, so like how you're breaking that down, like within the, so like when you're talking about Poland's budget.
Yep.
How many does that reflect? Like, is that custodial staff plus food service staff
No.
that's included in there?
Just
or-
specifically custodial staff,
Just
because
custodial.
remember, food service is a separate
Okay.
entity by itself. So the salaries and stuff are supposed to come out of,
Just the food
service.
Okay.
So the breakdown at PCS, this is for 4 custodians.
Full-time?
Yes.
Full-time.
Yeah. And that supplies line that I left the number out, that is actually a drop in 17,000.
So, it's probably for all the schools, but for the electricity and the heating fuel, is it all number 2, or is it propane, or what do we use for natural
Well,
gas?
it's either, we have either number 2, wood chips, or propane. So depending on the facility. At PCS, it is strictly, primarily oil for heating, but we do have some propane to do some of these smaller spaces in the kitchen.
Do we contract out for a number of years to get a fixed price on the fuel, or is it just kind of a
We
year?
bid annually.
You
Yep.
bid, it's an annual process?
Yep.
And do we do the same with electricity, or?
Electricity, we belong to a co-op, and the co-op, which several other school districts, they go out and, I don't know how many years, do you remember, Stacy, how many years the current one is?
It just started.
Okay. And-
January 1st.
Yeah, so, but that's not on a year-to-year basis, that's, isn't it like a 3 to 4?
3, I would
Yeah.
say, is
I
the
think it was 3
industry
years,
standard, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It was 3 years when you did it.
okay. All right, Elm Street School. The projected budget for Elm Street is $481,983, showing an increase of about 18%. And so when we look at the adjustments in this line, the biggest one that jumps out is the increase of 80,000. And the reason why we have such an increase and anytime you see an increase in the custodial salaries, you'll notice that the benefits line has also jumped up because, of course, they go hand in hand. The reason being that these numbers are jumping so high is because prior to our next proposed year, these custodians were put into the system-wide budget, and they were not billed specifically for a certain school. Those now have been broken out and, are billed to the specific school where those custodians work.
So are the benefits that you've listed there only for the 4 full-time, or is that for all the staff?
That's just custodial staff.
So for all, even the part-timers?
Yes.
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
So
The
part-time
part-timers don't get a
don't
whole
get
lot of
benefits.
benefits. It's the part-time benefits is almost nothing. So, it's-
But then whatever they're getting is rolled into that number?
Yes,
yes.
the benefit line includes Social Security, Medicare that we have to match, workers' comp and unemployment. So those are all taxes that we have to pay as the employer, whether someone's full-time or part-time. And then any health or dental insurance that the employee is eligible to partake in.
Okay.
I just have a question. Maybe I'm not grasping this as well as others, but so when I'm looking at the adjustments, so the salaries are up 80,000. Like I don't understand. I understand.
What line were they in previously?
Yeah,
So,
so-
Gary Purington is the example here. He was listed in the district system-wide budget, not in the Elm Street School, which is where he is a custodian. So
Right.
he needs to show there. So there might have been 3 custodians for a, I don't know what a custodial salary is, but say they make $20,000.
So you should see a
$30,000.
reflection in
Yes.
the school budget.
Yes.
Well, when we get
salaries.
when we get to system-wide, you're going to see where the difference is.
So you know how the school budgets, they kept saying they went down, and I told you, well, you weren't here last time, I was
Yeah.
saying, my superintendent's lines went down. What I shared with people is those aren't necessarily true drops, because things were taken out and they've been moved to
Right.
operations.
Right.
So you're gonna see these are up a lot. Last week's we were saying, oh yeah, we're down
Down
this
everywhere.
percent.
Yeah.
And,
So
and
it's
again,
just they
so-
were moved from one
yes.
line to another. or
So
one
now
budget.
they're where they're supposed to be, according to like the state, federal, coding structures.
But, so is this an increase though from what they were last year? No.
This year.
No, it's not an increase in salary.
Right, that's what I'm
So for
saying. So
instance,
it's not, it's just really you're
It's a
moving
shift.
it, so it's an
Right.
increase in this budget, but it's not like
The
huge
cost
increases in your.
in the Elm Street cost center, right. For instance, if you look at the FY16 budget that we're currently in, the printout shows $62,900 for custodians at Elm Street School.
Mhm.
That doesn't cover the custodians that work there. Some of them were budgeted in system-wide,
Right, okay.
so you'll see a big decrease.
If you take a look at this,
System-wide.
the spreadsheet, the single sheet that was handed out to you, and you look at the dollar increase or decrease, if you look at the different schools compared to the system-wide operations, you can see where the big chunk of money where the big chunk of money differs.
I'm just going to make just a general observation in regarding the accounting and how we're treating it. I 100% agree to get stuff in the right bucket. That's great. Put it there. We can benchmark against other schools, but the comparison is going to be difficult, and I can see this being a huge issue later on because I don't think people are going to understand. Is there a way that when we go to present this to have like a pro forma for last year, so you're matching apples to apples versus?
Well, the problem is that because we have aligned things to be more appropriate
Now,
budget lines,
yeah.
the lines that we are currently using are either incorrect or inappropriately named. So we do not have an apples-to-apples scenario.
The summary, that's why we built the summary,
Yes.
so we can show each cost center, how it looks. So you can see that big decrease in system-wide on the bottom,
Okay.
because a lot of there was so much in that section that didn't belong there that we've had to put in the correct different sections.
Right.
And what we're figuring is, if you're looking at PCS, and we're saying, you know, this budget is down a certain amount, and we're given the basics of where it went, you know,
Mhm.
and again, that's about as clear, that's probably the clearest way for us to do it, because even when John and Tom and I were going over their budgets, sometimes there might be 4 lines that have been collapsed to 2, but not all of the things from those 4 lines went into the 2,
Right.
because most of them might have gone in, been placed in the 2, but there might have been 4 or 5 things that also had to go in a different place. So it's
Mhm.
not as easy to say, take these 4 lines and look at these 2, they're all there. It's not, that's not the way it's working.
Right. No, I understand. I understand the difficulty. I absolutely do. The perception's going to be hard to convince, because I'm thinking a lot of it I think is people, because like I said 80% of your costs is your people, and you're moving them to where they were. I'm just saying it might be easier, again, just a pro forma to show, if you're going to show here's what we want it to be in 2015, this is correctly where it should be, this is what 2014 looked like had we put in all these spots.
So, one of the things we can do that I think might help, where you're talking salaries, it would be really easy for us to say, this is the salaries, this is the salary, total cost of salaries for this year, this is the total cost for next year.
Right.
That's very easy to
Right,
do.
and I think that'll cover
Yeah.
a lot of the questions.
Yeah.
Is all this data, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No.
Okay, is all this data in an Excel form?
No.
Because
Our software is called ProFund. And so these are all the accounting numbers that conform to the state's chart of accounts, which we are required to use.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we plug in the dollar amounts.
So you must have some export feature though in that you could pull it into Excel. We could develop some pivot tables from that so that we can simply show to people saying, okay, here's the fixed costs that we can't change. These are contractual salaries. These are negotiated prices based on heating costs or plowing. And then these are the other costs that are what people really want to look at. We're adding this, we're not doing that. Then people can actually have
But
a
that's
view.
essentially what this presentations
It is,
are.
yeah.
We're going to stand in
We
front of
will in
people
the
and we're
end.
going to say,
Yeah.
In
here's,
order to present though.
here,
Yeah.
yes, and
Okay.
that's, I even do that at the budget presentation, is I will stand up and say, here's an overview of our budget. And at next week's meeting for this group, we will have a line-by-line budget for you, because we will be at the end of our final 3 presentations and be able to say, now we want you to see the whole picture, line by line. Typically, it would have this year's budget and then next year's budget. You're going to see this year's budget, but you're going to have the cost center totals at the bottom. So I think you'll feel more comfortable once you see that line by line. And when you are looking at that, you go, oh yes, we had all these conversations during this series of presentations. And the other thing that we can do is review it again. If, I would be glad when we're going over the full bottom line budget to have say, can you remind me again why this line or this cost center is up so much?
I think the only request, I guess, is going to piggyback on him, and it sounds like you guys are already in the works on it, is when we come time to start bringing in the public, we all understand what you've done for accounting-wise and starting to reallocate. But I think your suggestion of saying salaries last year were here, this is what we're contractually, and this is what it is. Building maintenance was here, this is what it is. Instead of going down to drilling into Elm Street and pulling stuff like that, just keep it very high level so people understand as close as they can get, because I can see definitely where everybody's point
Someone's gonna
is.
get lost in the details.
But I know, I've been to the last readouts last year, and I know how you do it, so I'm not too worried about it, but just to keep it,
Well, and we
as
agree with you
generic
because-
as we can on those.
Yes.
The perception will be is that there's huge raises.
Exactly.
in-
Well, you
built
see
into these budgets.
$80,000, and that's exactly what
Right.
Tina's head was, well, what,
And that could
Well,
be,
I didn't think that's probably what it was.
Right.
Or I want to.
But I don't want to, I don't want to raise, fears and apprehensions that we're messing up with a lot of different things, when all we're doing is actually making a lot of accounting corrections that
Right.
should have been done probably years ago, but
Right.
now that we have you two here, we can do that.
And one of the other pieces to this is that when we are looking at, say, benefits, we put in 5%. So that's easy to say. 5% is,
Sure.
this much money. And the salaries will be very easy to break out and say how much total cost for salaries. So
Sure.
I really feel like when we get to next week's presentation and you're not seeing, we're trying to share the details with you.
Sure.
So that you'll have a good handle on, what our process has been like and make sure you understand it. And, but again, when we get to the presentations, yes, we're going
And
to.
I can say greatly thank you for getting it all correct, because this is going to make a lot more sense come next year. This year is obviously a growing
Exactly.
pains period, but
oh, you're not kidding.
yeah, no.
It's been a challenge.
But in the same level, I know what you're going to be doing for the towns and simplifying it, so I know you're going to be doing a lot of stuff, but this is going to make it better next year for us, so thanks in advance. But keeping it high level and simple, I think, is going to be the best way to do it.
And it will also help that our overall budget isn't up as much as it has been
Yeah.
in the last 2 years. So, if we're looking at a, $350,000 increase, and we're saying this is, this percentage is salaries and this amount is benefits, it's really easy to see there's only, and this as much as facilities, it's really easy to see there's nothing else went up.
Yeah.
I think it's actually going to be easier to explain because
Cool.
those are our big three things.
Okay, where are we? Elm Street. Okay, are we all set with Elm Street? Okay, moving on to Minnet. So right now, the proposed budget for Minnet is $283,945, which represents, almost a 7% increase. Again, under the adjustments, although not an increase to the budget, we have shifted $28,000 worth of custodial salaries and $8,000 worth of benefits. Contracted professionals is down 9,000. Waste removal is up 7.5 thousand. Communications is down. Supplies is down, and heating fuel is down.
Is communications just a telephone service?
Just our phone system. Yeah.
Okay.
Phone and internet, correct? Yes.
Yes.
What's some examples of contracted services or
Well,
professionals?
for example, like we have, a heating maintenance contract. We have our fire alarm monitoring contract.
Pest services,
Yeah.
pest control,
We have to have our grease traps in our kitchens pumped, the clothing allowance for the custodial staff, any state inspections and licensing fees, our heating contract, our fire alarm, and our security alarm monitoring.
Is our electric bill at mine seriously $25,000?
yes.
Yeah, and actually, the number that we see there is adjusted to be pretty close to actual.
Is that something that we can, over the next few years, look at replacing some of those light bulbs to more efficient, like we had talked about, and possibly getting grants to start doing this stuff in the future?
Do you want me to go there?
No? Okay. We can do it later. We can have this sidebar later. That's fine.
We have a larger plan that's in the works.
Okay.
Probably 3 or 4 years
Yeah.
down the road.
That's fine. I was just
Yeah.
about to cause
Certainly.
anything, but
It's shocking how much our
That's-
electric
yeah,
bills
that's-
are. And, I don't know if you remember last January, I think it was a $40,000 or $50,000 increase in 1 month.
mm-hmm.
And so we are, that's why we went into this co-op.
Sure.
So the co-op involves, trying to remember how many schools. I know Bethel's involved, we're involved, I think Oxford Hills is involved. But a company came to our Western Maine Superintendent's Association, and the goal is that the that if we all get together in the region and we're buying electricity in bulk, that we can get reduced costs. So those of us who weren't in contracts right now, bought in now with the goal of other people as their contracts come open, that they will join the co-op and our co-op will have more buying power. So that was where we are right now. And then part of it is that we don't want to just be trying to get cheaper electricity. We want to reduce our use of electricity, and that is the part that takes a little bit more time, and part of it is training staff to be more energy conscientious, and then part of it is replacing some of our
fixtures and things like that.
fixtures that are non-energy efficient.
We did have an engineering firm come in a couple months ago and kind of look at specifically the high school, middle school. And one of the challenges is going to be the upfront expense. You know, we're going to have to put that capital investment in to get, you know, our return, and it's coming, but not this year.
And
That's fine.
And it will pay for itself in 2.5 years, but you have to have the money to do it. So if you pay $50,000 to $75,000, it seems like a lot, but you make that up in just 2.5 years. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean,
We are working on it.
25,000 in one smaller school in the course of 12 months. That's crazy. Okay, I don't even want to see it what it is for a high school.
And a follow-up to that, I'm assuming once you get to that point where everything has been spec'd out, then there'll be money from Efficiency Maine for some
We're
of
hoping
this?
it's still there, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John, just another quick question on staffing. So I assume that the supervisor for K through 6 is divided probably between the 3 budgets that you're talking about for Poland and Lyon? No?
It's all on
No.
Elm Street.
No, we put Gary, because Gary's home base is Elm Street.
Oh, okay.
And we put all of his salary at Elm Street, because he doesn't really physically provide any labor in any of those schools, it's just oversight.
Okay. And then, so what's the staff you pay for at Elm Street and Minot?
At Elm Street, there are 4 full-time custodial, and one of those is Gary. And at Minot, we have 2 full-time and a part-time, I believe.
Thank you.
Okay, here. This is where we're going to see our most dramatic shift, because up until this point, Whittier and the high school, everything was lumped up into the high school budget, and it was assumed that the high school was paying the bills. So, Whittier didn't get any breaks this year. We're looking at a budget of $207,681. Again, still a fluid number, which looks like a very significant increase at 162%. So when we look at the adjustments, again, there's some shifts in benefits and custodial. And to answer your question, what we did is with Tony's salary, we cut him in half between the high school and the middle school. And the middle school has 2 custodians dedicated, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we have a couple missing.
There are 5 custodians for the high school.
They're all full-time?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
John, can you go back, what was the increase for?
The percentage or the amount?
The amount, 207.
The amount is 207,681.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll post this so that you have all the pages.
Thank you.
So electricity is up about 16,000. Again, these are just shifts, not necessarily increases. So waste removal, snow plowing, repairs, all of these things at one time were billed to the high school have now been, designated for middle school expenses. And the way Tony broke that up is essentially it's based on square footage. So he took the square footage of the middle school, compared it to the high school, and percentage-wise, just broke it down.
So theoretically, would this possibly affect our per pupil, because I know per pupil cost is broken down, is it K to 8,
Yes.
9 to 12?
And that's why it was important that we made this adjustment, because what the state does is it looks at what is your cost for your 9th through 12th grade students, and they have a list of each school and what their
Right.
per pupil costs are. So it looks like we're spending a lot more on our high school students than we really are. And then they have the K to 8 as well. So you want it to be accurate. And if we're spending, $10,000 per high school student, that's what it is. You don't want it to show that it's 12,000.
Yeah. So that will
It's not
affect-
that much of a
So
difference.
2 of our grade levels, the operational costs
Yes.
were in the wrong budget.
John, overall, And custodian, are we looking at funding the same number of people, or are there any there's no additional?
We have not, no,
positions?
still maintenance of effort as far as custodians, all the same staff.
Okay.
Yeah. The one thing I do want to make a special note of in this budget is you'll notice that we have a classroom lease at 16.5. Those are the one of the two classrooms that are on the back side of Whittier that most people don't even realize that are there. Those leases, one of those leases is coming off this year. And the reason I want to make a note of that now is I'm going to come back to it when we get to the CIP budget.
Is that the one that originally came from Minnet?
Yes.
We owned the one from Minnet. One of them. The other one, of course, we have.
Oh,
a
okay,
lease.
so it's the one that we got from Schiavi when we put them in?
I believe so,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Any other questions on the middle school? Okay, moving on to the high school. The high school proposed budget is $773,924, an increase of about 8%. So, again, looking at these, this is where we see that negative shift from where we took out of the high school. And for the custodian salaries and benefits, again, Tony's salary used to be part of the system-wide budget. Let's see. Contracted professionals is down. Again, a shift that was, part of it was part of system-wide. Waste removal, snow removal. Repairs is down. Property insurance, communications. So you can see why there was such a significant difference between the middle school and the high school budgets.
Can you just go back to the Whittier slide, just because we just don't have that page, so I can't really.
Yep.
compare.
Is this the one you want or the old?
Yeah, so,
The one before.
no, actually, this is the one I was looking for. So like, the budget shifts, not everything matches on,
Right.
why doesn't it, if it says a budget shift here that it's gone up, why isn't that number the same as the budget shift on the other?
Well, again, remember when Tina said that sometimes we had to take 4 budget lines and combine them into 2. Not all of the
Yeah.
budget lines went into,
Understood, yep, thank you.
And also on this one, Aaron, the custodial salaries, so Tony was at central office.
Yeah,
He has now been moved to Bruce Whittier and PRHS. So one didn't, it wasn't like it was shifted from the
no,
high school to the middle school. It's basically shifted from a whole different cost center.
well, it was more like the fixed costs, the heating, fuel.
Right.
Like on your PRHS adjustments, it says it's down 10.7 because of a budget shift, but on the Whittier, it says it's up 13.3. So I'm trying to figure out where does that extra 3,000 come from? If they're both building related last year.
It would be also to actual, so if we're showing our cost, so if you're showing your cost for the heating, I know our boiler, our wood chip, we had increased, we had increased cost, correct? Is that where, I'm trying to remember what the shift was for the heating cost. But again, we would be looking for actual, so sometimes there's a shift, sometimes there's an increase.
Okay.
And sometimes there's both.
Yeah, that's fine.
And that's
That's
why
fine.
that's why it's difficult to say. If you're looking at bottom line, it's a lot easier to look
Absolutely,
at.
no,
But
I
if you're looking at
I
each
saw
line-
budget shift on both of them and made the assumption that all we did was literally had one roof and we
Right.
just shifted it to the
Yeah.
right category, but it's not strictly a
it would have been
budget
nice if it was that easy because it would have been clean and easy to understand.
Exactly, that's fine.
And it didn't work out
Understood.
that way.
And that's typically what we've done in the past, as you know,
Yeah.
is people would say, oh, so you moved this from Bruce Whittier to here, and we can see it's a perfect,
Sure.
switch, but.
Did we ever fix the oil receiving valve? I know we talked about that, to be able to receive larger tanks.
We haven't done anything with it yet.
Got it, thank you.
Okay, system-wide. So the system-wide, essentially, this is the budget that covers everything else that's not necessarily falls within a school building. We're projecting $149,483, which is a negative increase of about 60%. And when we get into the adjustments, you'll see why we're showing such a decrease. And like we've been saying all along, this is where we took a lot of those salary lines out of the system-wide and put them in the appropriate buildings where they belong. So, of course, salaries and benefits is a huge chunk of that. Contracted professional services, if you remember, we had budgeted $50,000.
Lost the.
Oops, thank you.
We had budgeted 50,000 for snow plowing, and when we went out to bid, that came in significantly less at about 20,000. And in this year, we're actually saving money because one of those contractors was based on a per storm, and then the other one was contracted for the full season, whether, we used them or not. So, we took a gamble on both, and we're actually going to make out, thanks to Mother Nature. And then, of course, just the typical other expenses, our repairs, our insurance, supplies, electricity, and heating fuel.
So what did you put in there for snow plowing for next year?
What we did is we put in the actual costs that were bid out this year, so we kept those numbers the same.
Okay.
Of course, next year, we're going to get booted in the butt because we'll
Yeah.
probably get, 80 inches of snow. So what you see on this slide is the budget summary, which is essentially the sheet that's in front of you, broken down. So in a nutshell, the overall operation expenses for next year, we're projecting about an increase of a little more than 6%.
And what is because of all these shifts, now we're at the 140. What is driving that 140? Is there other stuff that's, like I said, coming in from a completely different cost center that's coming in too? Or is there?
Well, there are, some increases built into, we did allow a little more money for fuel because that's such an unpredictable number. And we bid out our heating oil this year, and currently we are paying $1.62 per gallon. So we have to allow for a buffer in there because chances are fuel's not going to go down anymore. It's probably going to start going in the other direction. And then
Salary and benefits is a big piece of it.
yeah, but again, those were not increases; they were just shifts. There are some raises built in, based on the contractual obligations.
He says like a 3% from.
We'll have to figure that out. When we did the contract, we're in our second year of the contract, it was 3%, the average was 3% over 3 years, each year for 3 years. But when you actually look at what the increase is currently, it's less than 3% because we've had about 40 new staff members. So you might have somebody leaving at a $45,000, hire them at a $35,000.
Right.
And so the increases are quite a bit less than 3% from last year this year. We can share that percent with you next week, but like we were talking about is to look at. I don't know exactly what it is because we haven't pulled all salaries out to say, here's how much the actual salary raise is based on the new current employees, not the employees from 2 years ago.
Right.
Some of the other increases, there was a...
On health insurance, no, we won't have those till April. So we put in, the superintendents were encouraged to put in 6%. We put in 5% because in the 4 years I've been here, we've never been over 5%. We think that's safe. We have pretty good, healthy staff numbers. But again, it could be 8%. No, there have been years where people have had increases of 10%. We just have not. So we're feeling like 5% is safe. Whatever the actual is in April, this budget will be adjusted before it goes to voters.
And we're rated as RSU 16, not the full teachers across the state.
Yeah, we have
Right, we are our own.
We have our own rating.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And some of those increases are with our contracted professionals. They have built-in increases depending on the length of the contracts. Some of those just they were built in whenever the contracts were originally signed.
John, what do you think the biggest change with Bruce Whittier? I know that we talked about some of the things that were shifted and that sort of thing. When you look at the high school, there's some decrease, but it's not as significant as the increase in Bruce Whittier. So I'm just wondering if there was, because I know there was more cost shifting from, instead of the high school budget going into Bruce Whittier, but that's quite an increase in Bruce Whittier from last year to this year.
Okay, well, remember, they're not necessarily increases. They're only shifts that drive the budget number up.
What's the biggest shifts then
Okay.
that made that difference? That's so much of a difference.
Well, going into the middle school budget, Well, the biggest ones, of course, are the custodians' benefits and salaries. We were looking at 51,000 for custodial salaries, 18,000 in benefits. The electricity is about 16,000.
So they didn't have those in
Repairs.
their budget last year at
No.
all?
No,
And
Yeah.
so that, because I know the high school, yeah, did have like a lot of like electricity and
I think in the
things like
current
that in their
year
previous
budget, Whittier has, what,
Five lines.
five lines. What are those lines, Stacy?
Copier lease, classroom lease purchase, which is paid off, so it's not even in this budget. Furniture and equipment of $5,600. There were custodian salaries of $32,000 and benefits of $18,000.
So,
That's
that 32,000 only covered one of the three
Right.
custodial staff there.
Right.
So when you associate the benefits, that is the most significant change, I think.
And we have to remember that some of the increase for Whittier came from the high school budget, but some of it came from the system-wide.
Right.
budget. So it was actually coming
Yeah, I
in
know
from two
overall
places.
it's probably sort of a kind of a wash, but I'm just trying to like in my head figure out like what was the biggest chunk that made it go?
I think most of the shifts had to do with salaries and
Right,
benefits,
right.
affecting all of our school buildings.
Well, because those are our biggest costs.
Any questions on any of the buildings?
Just to come back, that
Yeah.
that 140, that's because that's the bottom line, that's what I'm focusing on.
Yep.
That is an increase within operations. There is no transfer from somewhere else coming into operations, whether from the schools or from central office, or there's none that's coming in that's impact that 140. It's just strictly within,
Correct.
okay.
Well,
Yeah.
no, central office did have a lot of the operations of system-wide were under Tina's budget
Oh,
in
yes, under the superintendent's budget.
superintendent.
Okay.
So she had the cost of running the buildings. She had heating under hers, she had snow plowing, trash removal.
So there is stuff that's in the proposed FY17 number that was nowhere within the FY16 number. Okay, this,
It was in.
it was completely outside.
Yes.
It was there, but it's.
Wasn't even in operations.
Wasn't even operations. Okay, so the 140 is not costs increasing in operations. It's something else moving in.
Yes.
That's what.
If we took Tony alone, salary and benefits, it's pretty near half of
Yeah.
And
the
one of
140.
the things, it comes back to the same idea with the teacher, with the per pupil cost for the 9 through 12. The state and the federal government break out how much is a school department spending on their administrative central office. And so you certainly, when you add all of those things, it looks like you have a really expensive administrative cost, which we didn't. I mean, we were still below the state average, even with all of those costs in here. And when we were talking about the business manager position, I would look at the number and I'd say, we're below the state average, but we're not below as much as I would think we are, knowing what our staff is compared to staff around the state. And then when Stacy came on board, she said, I can't believe you guys have all this stuff in superintendent's line. You shouldn't have that there. And now I know. Now it makes sense to me why those numbers weren't so far below the state average as I thought they should be. And now that will be representative. What is your administration cost? Because the state wants to know that, and they do state averages for that, so you can compare how much cost you have in different areas.
See, that one person is pretty near half of the
Right.
140.
Okay,
John,
Tom?
did you want to talk about the summary page, or did you already do that?
Well, the summary page is essentially, what you're looking at is your spreadsheet here. Like I said, we're looking at for a $140,000 increase district-wide, which represents that 6.9%. No, I'm out of time. I'm leaving at 7.
Transportation by the numbers. Under my department, I cover buses, vans, trucks, and vouchers. Just a little thing on the vouchers, those are, we give out not give out gas cards, we have gas cards for parents who transport their students that are homeless out of district, or out of district transportation for other schools from our students. I have 31 school buses, 4 vans, and 4 trucks, service trucks for the district that I maintain. 1 full-time transportation director, that's me. 1 part-time administrative assistant, 2 full-time mechanics, and 26 full-time drivers and 1 part-time driver. We have a total of 18 high school bus routes dedicated day-to-day and 19 elementary routes. And we transport about 1,400 students a day on those buses. And 17 out-of-district students total, which is part of those vouchers. Daily, we travel about 2,800 miles a day, and the longest run, one run, is about 35 miles away.
And for those of you who are wondering, so we transport 1,400 students. We have about 1,744 students, so a good majority of our students, as you can see, are ride on our bus system.
Tom, the 17 out of district, how does that compare to other years?
That is up over the last years. Last year we had 13, and they come and go.
Yeah.
It's always fluctuating. I spoke with Holly earlier, and I think we have a couple more coming.
Okay.
So, and Jenny Rose is also part of that. Some of those come from Jenny Rose.
But as far as like the superintendent's agreements, those are being
No
phased
trans-
out.
No, we have no
Nope.
transportation.
There's none anymore.
There's none
Okay.
of those. No.
I didn't know if there was any more
These
grandfathered
are-
in.
No.
Generally district schools
Mm-hmm.
or homeless
Okay.
students.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
Thank you.
You said the parents of these other district kids have credit cards?
Not credit cards. We will call in a gas card to like dad's place or the closest convenient fuel station for that parent.
So
So
how
if a
do we
child-
monitor that we're paying for gas to
We're-
transport kids and not go to?
School attendants.
Yeah.
And Jenny Rose is in charge of making sure that they are actually where they're at. You saying where they're living?
Well, you pull up and, I'm just asking to be facetious, I guess, but they pull up and fill a gas tank.
Yep.
They don't use that vehicle just to run back and forth to school?
No, they don't.
Go all
There's a
over.
mileage rate that they have figured out to and from their house to the school only.
So if it's 24 miles to the school and back, the parent gets that mileage only. So
Okay.
they may take 10 miles to head over to, Hannaford to get their groceries. They
That's
don't
on
get
their
paid
own.
for that.
We're paying
They're
for
only
the
paid
joyriding.
Yeah, they're only paid for the mileage to take the child to and from the
What-
site that they take them to.
Yeah, I thought that's how it worked, but what's the reimbursement rate?
54 cents a mile.
Pardon?
54 cents,
54.
whatever the current IRS rate
Yeah.
reimbursement rate
Yes.
is.
And you said that's tied to their attendance, so if they don't show up that day,
Right.
the parent does not get that money.
Correct.
That's correct.
And I'm in touch with the schools and I get their attendance weekly.
Okay.
Which students are these that are getting this? I missed something here.
So we have some students who are homeless.
Oh, okay.
And when a child is homeless, they have McKinney-Vento law, and it tells us what kind of supports we have to put in place to take barriers away from keeping them in school, even if they don't have a home. So if a child and a family are living in a shelter, we have to pay for them to be able to drive their child to school if they have a vehicle, or we have to provide transportation like a taxi cab or a van to go pick them up. And we currently have, is it 34, I don't remember them, but 34 homeless students, I believe. Yeah, it's high. And also, there are times when a child might be in an out-of-district placement. Maybe they have severe autism and they're at a specialty program because we don't have a program that can meet their needs. And we would provide transportation for that child, but sometimes the parent prefers to transport them because of their specific needs. So we do the same thing. It's a lot cheaper to have a parent drive them and us just pay that mileage than to have like a taxi cab or a Community Concepts take them. So that's what these cards do. And again, it's tied to attendance, and they only get paid if they actually take them to the site.
Okay. Sorry to keep us going on that, and this will be my last one. When you say homeless, is this kids who are living with other family members than their own? So if living with aunts, uncles, or whatever, for whatever reason, are they deemed as homeless, or is these actual family units that are homeless?
It depends. There's a variety of ways to be designated homeless.
Okay.
And basically, they have to have a stable, adequate overnight place to be, to live, to be considered not homeless. So if you're at an aunt's house tonight, and then you're at a friend's house tomorrow night, and then you're somewhere else the next night, you're considered homeless. If you're shifting between 3 or 4 family members, you're still considered homeless, because it's not an adequate and stable overnight place for you to stay. If you're living with an aunt or an uncle, and it's a stable place, and you're gonna be there for a while, you would come off homeless status once that site becomes stable for you.
And who checks, like, to verify this stuff? I mean, is that a
That's-
state thing?
We have Jenny Rose,
Jenny
who's
goes out,
our,
okay.
yeah, who is our homeless liaison.
Okay.
She works with the state people and also with other school departments. So if somebody is living in Lewiston and they want to come to Poland, she might be working with the Lewiston School Department to kind of verify and confirm the
Okay.
arrangements. And we have to make sure all barriers are taken away for them to keep accessing their education.
Okay.
Sometimes a whole family is homeless and is in a shelter. Sometimes a child is unaccompanied, there's no family with them, and they're on their own because they've been either kicked out of the house or they've run away.
Okay.
So there's all different ways to be labeled homeless, and there's really specific criteria. Jenny is responsible for identifying if they qualify or not, and then working with the arrangements.
The cost of the vouchers, is that just part of like the fuel cost?
Fuel line.
Or does that
They
get
come right-
broken out?
comes out of the fuel line.
It just goes in the fuel line, okay, thanks.
And we do our best to not do the vouchers, we'll use our own transportation. 99% of other school districts will share costs with us as well, to cut it in half. They'll go one way, we'll go the other way,
Okay.
whatever works best for both of us.
Okay. Thank you.
How'd you do this? Transportation. Overall, I'm down 0.55% over last year. The biggest adjustments for my budget, salary is down $6,000. That is more current to actual, or we have one driver who has reduced his hours. So that's more actual.
And also, for the contracts that are settled for next year, the raises are in the budget currently. Bus drivers' contract salaries are not already, raises aren't determined yet. So there are no raises in the transportation lines at all. And we have, we'll talk about this next week, we have a contingency line where we've put some money for those contracts that aren't done yet. There aren't many of them, central office, bus drivers. Is there anybody else, Stacy?
There was a little for the ed tech.
A little bit for the ed techs that we hadn't put their steps in yet. So that's one of the reasons we're not seeing any increases at all at this salary line.
Benefits, we have an increase of 21,000. I have 3 employees that have now spouses working for us as well, which makes them eligible for a different benefit package, and that is the increase there. Contracted professional services is a decrease of 6,000. Again, that was piggyback on John. I had a couple contracted professional service lines that were added together, and I had one that was shifted to dues and fees, which is not up there, but you'll see it next week in the overall change. Repairs, maintenance, equipment, bus maintenance that goes out of district. We are seeing those cost savings now, having 2 full-time mechanics. We feel very safe reducing that by $15,000 for next year, because we're maintaining 95 to 98% of our fleet right in-house now, so that's a big savings there. Supplies is a large increase, and again, I had 3 supplies lines last year. This is all being rolled into one, so it's a budget shift that you'll see next week.
What's considered a supply? Like what items would be?
Supplies, I had a supplies line for central office supplies for my department. Then I had a supplies line for
Like
the school
paper towels
buses.
and
For the
toilet
maintenance
paper,
garage
cleaning.
guys?
Yes, and
Yes, yep. I had a line for supplies that the drivers needed for the buses, paper towels, cleaners,
Okay.
tires. That was also the tires
Tires.
and parts.
Okay.
That was all one line. Internal supplies was another line, and also equipment fixed assets. You'll see that next week in the overall. Those are camera systems and radio systems. So we consolidated all that into one.
Did that take into consideration, I know we were gonna sell off a couple buses, but we decided we were gonna part them out. Does that take into consideration some of those parts not being purchased for future needs, or?
Those parts wouldn't be usable for our new school buses.
Okay.
Those buses are about 12, 13 years old and different makes and models. So
Were you
We
asking
do
about
part-
potential revenue for those?
No, just if we're budgeting parts and tires and things into there, I know
we've already stripped the tires off that we can use.
Yeah.
The rest of the parts, it's different.
Just part them out, okay.
It's just a different make and model.
But it kind of makes sense, like if you have, because of the mechanics being here, so, you know, you're not shipping things out, so you're gonna have to pay for the stuff to fix the buses, right? You know, so that's what you're saying is under the supply line, right? Some of
Yes.
that mechanical stuff.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that would go up, because now we have the mechanics who are fixing them for us, so, yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, the out-of-district costs also include parts too, so now we'll just be buying the parts instead.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the bus lease?
Is there a fuel cost savings? Or is that not?
I left my fuel cost savings flat from last year.
We cut it a lot last year.
We dropped it quite a bit last year, and we're still low fuel for this year. Knock on wood. It's at a point where next year, if it increased, we'll be safe.
Okay.
Do we know what our per mile cost is for the whole, including labor and everything, the whole department?
I can get that for you.
Yeah, I mean, you said 2,800 miles a day. I know that's a rough number. And
It is.
I was saying
I have
so many
31.
days to school, and it comes up to a little over $6 a mile.
Yeah, I have 31 buses. 11 of them, those buses are 4 years new or newer. The rest of them are older, so the older buses, less gas miles. So
Yeah.
I could figure that out.
We got rid of most of all the gas buses now, haven't we?
I have two gas buses still on the road.
Yeah.
The rest of them are all gone.
Good. Yeah, like I say, I don't know exactly. Just using the rough numbers you had and taking all the transportation comes up to somewhat over $6 a mile.
Yep.
Count labor and all.
We've increased our van usage. We now currently have 3 vans running. We had only 1 van last year, and that's due to the increase of all the out-of-district costs changes. So the gas, if we break down gas by diesel, the gas has actually increased over last year.
Yeah.
Not by a lot. The interest on the bus lease, we have 3 school buses coming off this year, off lease, and we have in the budget for 2 full-size school buses and a mini. The mini obviously is a little smaller than the full-size bus, so it'll be a little bit cheaper. But those buses are also 5 years ago, different payments, different interest rates than they are now. So
And
overall, it's about $2,000 increase.
That's different than I told you last week. I thought we had 2 coming off and 2 coming on, and we actually have 3 coming off and
2.5.
regular size and
It's
1
listed
mini coming
as-
on. So the $2,000 was correct, but I hadn't realized it was 3 coming off and 3 coming on. So that's an update for you.
Does that present a capacity problem where we're taking 3 full size off and adding 2.5 on, or?
No, it's our needs.
It's our needs,
We
okay.
have too many buses we have on the road during the day, and they're old.
So
One
the
of them just
state
come off.
approves, how many buses do you have that are able to be
I
retired?
have 15 eligible for retirement.
And the state has approved us to get 3.
Oh.
And that's how that works. So every year they look at across the whole state who has, buses at different ages and needs, and they determine how many, they only have so many they give out, so your district gets what they feel you need compared to what other people need. And so they have deemed us to replace 3 of those.
And so it's not paid for by the state, so it's 100% paid for by the state?
Yeah.
Well,
We just front it.
We front it,
the first year, because you don't know the arrangement. We get fronted the first year, and then they start paying the next year after that, and then it gets paid back over 5 years?
On year 6, we're not making a payment, but they're giving us a subsidy.
So basically, it's like a reimbursement system. You pay, then they'll pay what you paid, and it kind of rolls forward.
Gotcha,
So
gotcha.
that it's totally funded by the end of the lease. That's why it's good to stay on cycle, and when they are agreeing to replace one, you do it, because it keeps your maintenance steady. And we've kind of projected out the next 5 or 6 years, and if we follow their schedule of which ones are coming off, and if they approve, like 2 off and 2 come on, our rotation for the next 6 or 7 years will be neutral, our cost for our buses.
Excellent.
Oops, sorry, went the wrong direction.
Budget summary. Small shot. Overall decrease is $8,500, and again, that's not including the new salaries for the drivers. We'll have for next week.
Yes, we'll have a small adjustment next week to report to you there's one change. Am I correct, Tom, that you have one line that you realized was low, and we were going to need to add that in and do a report, an adjustment report next week?
Yeah, under the parts, under the school trip line, was not where it should have been.
So we're actually expecting this, you're going to see next week probably an adjustment where this will be, rather than an $8,000 savings, will basically be closer to a flat budget.
So when you say trips, those are extra trips, those aren't dailies, those are
Sports trips,
sporting
activities, field trips.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Okay, the capital improvement budget that we're proposing for next year, the schools put in the request for what they thought that they needed, and then we evaluated and have listed the things that we believe have to be taken care of. Under Poland Community School, these 3 items are must-haves. They're non-negotiable. We are actually going to be taking $16,000 from the current budget, adding it to the $16,000 that we're putting into next year, and as opposed to doing little patches here and there, we're going to do a larger section all in one. The fire alarm system is not, although it is functioning, is a very antiquated system. We're having a hard time getting parts, and it needs full replacement. So you're looking at $32,000 there. And the oil storage, the fuel oil storage tank for the heating system needs replacement. It is out of date and is out of code, so that has to be done. We are proposing placing a 2-classroom modular unit at the middle school to deal with our overcrowding issues. And this is where I had mentioned under the Whittier budget, I made the special note about the lease. Although the lease will be coming off, if the CIP budget is approved, we will be leasing another modular unit. The total quoted cost for the modular unit is about $85,000, not including any of the interest that will accrue through borrowing. But the way we are allowed to set this lease up is that we can make our down payment the first year and then make the additional payments for I think we're going to plan to do 3 years after that. So we're looking to make the $10,000 down payment in the first year and then pay the $75,000 balance off the next 3 years after that. We will have the $15,000 worth of site work in the first year, which of course will go away after that. By doing it this way, it makes it neutral from the lease payment that's actually coming off the budget this year. So we are, when you talk to Carrie and Sean, their number one priority for their school is they need that additional space. The benefit of the additional space not only relieves some of the crowding issues, but it allows us to bring back some of the out-of-placement students that we have that we're currently spending a lot of money for moving them to different locations. So in the long run, the modular is going to probably won't be completely cost neutral, but will offer some savings, for us.
And one of the things that we've talked about is the items in this budget are basically maintenance of effort. This is one of those items that we kind of have on a priority list. And so if, when we're talking about this, if you remember from last week, we talked about needing another special ed teacher, and that was on a priority list but not in the budget, and also a social worker. So the actual, what we're thinking the savings will be that we're bringing some kids back. It will help pay for the teacher, but it probably won't cover the cost of the actual modular as well. And if that happens and we approve the modular, and we, of course, if we do that, we need the teacher, or we want the teacher, we would be reducing the out-of-district placement cost. So there, you'll see, if we do this, then we can take this out, or we can lower this number.
Now, are all these repairs and upgrades or changes, are those based on just a guess, or have they been bid out and you have firm contractual
No.
pricing or bid pricing?
No, we have not bid. What happened was they got an initial estimate, because we had to have a budget number to work with.
Sure.
And then once we get the funding secured, then we will go out to bid and, have the contractors compete over that work.
So it is possible, though, that the actual repairs based on
Could be
whatever
less.
cost could be less
Yeah.
or more?
Sure, yeah.
So,
And then, yeah,
on the modular, so we have 2 out here now,
we do,
right? So there'll be a third
yes.
in same area?
No.
You don't want to know where it's going
Okay,
to
so
go.
we'll talk about that later. And then, so it's 2 classrooms, so you're talking 2 additional teachers
Yes.
as well?
Actually, the 2 teachers are already hired staff members. The wellness, middle school wellness class would be there, and the foreign language. Right now, the foreign language teacher is on a cart moving around from classroom to classroom, and the wellness is in the high school space. So if the wellness teacher's not there, the special ed class would be in that that classroom that opens up, because we've moved the middle school to a
So the
module.
teachers you already have, that would go in there?
Yes.
And then how
Well,
did
the
the-
special ed you'll see the
Right.
special ed is
That was
on the
one we were
priority.
on, right.
That's the one we don't have in the budget.
And how do you get students back? I didn't understand that process you were saying.
So we have some students in out-of-district placement, say they have really severe behavior needs or
Oh, because of the special
autistic,
ed class.
and we don't have space for we don't have space, so we can't have a program here. Costs between $40,000 and $60,000 a student to go to an out-of-district placement. So if we can even bring back 2 or 3 students,
Yep.
we can pay for the teachers or a social worker to work with those students who need it, and have our own program here, but you can't do that if you don't have the space.
Right.
So it's costing us, we've got $450,000 in out-of-district placement costs, and that has gone up significantly in the last 2 years. If you remember, I'm sure you remember, Tina, because you're on the board, but we had 6 new students come last year that needed out-of-district placement. We had to freeze the budget in January to save enough money to cover the costs of that last year, and then, of course, we budgeted to actual for this year.
And then the other item we have is, we do have some security improvements that we need to make system-wide. Now, keep in mind that the capital improvement budget it requires additional local funds. We don't receive any subsidies from the state for this, so it's kind of a standalone question when it goes out to vote. So even though they're things that we need, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will pass.
Just 2 quick questions. The longevity of the fire alarm system, how long has it been there, and how long do you how long is the prospective system going to last us for that $32,000?
I believe the fire alarm system that is in there now, parts of it are original whenever, the fire alarm was installed.
That would have been in 1955.
50-something.
Wow. Okay.
That's when the building was built.
Good ROI.
Yeah, not bad.
Okay.
And if you were to go in and look at it, you'll see, there were additions and parts and pieces that were put together, and but this replaces the central brain to the system. We don't have to redo any wiring, but we have to change some specific units, and the motherboard, so to speak.
And then that $65,000 for the oil storage tank. How big of a unit is that? And it's not in ground, right?
Actually, it's half
it
in,
is.
half out.
Okay.
Right now, it sits in a concrete septic tank
Okay.
Not used as a septic tank, but, you know, it was
No,
bought for that purpose. And it has reached its useful life, and DEP requires those to be changed, you know, after they've been used for a certain amount of time, and they show certain levels of wear and tear.
Are we going to stick with the same system of keeping it in a
Actually, we're proposing an above-ground system.
easier maintenance? And
Yeah.
that? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, because right now, the system that we have, because it's subgrade, it requires a pumping system, so on and so forth, which is, you know, difficult to maintain. Not anything that we can do, and oftentimes we have to have it contracted out. The new system would be, you know, grade, but still in a containment system, but easier accessible, and, you know, should be less expensive to maintain.
Okay.
And the fire alarm is inoperational. You're not supposed to have the kids in the school, correct?
It is functional.
It's right, but if
Right.
it
Absolutely.
shorts out or whatever, theoretically the kids need to leave the
If
school.
we got in there in the morning and the fire alarm system was out, we would have to cancel school. Yes.
And we had that situation already this year, and we're told we had to cancel school on a Monday, and we got fortunate enough that the company could come over the weekend, and they're like, well, you're going to have to pay overtime, and we said, we'll pay overtime, or whatever it was, to get them to come in, because and that's what they said, you know, it was, at first it was questionable about whether they could actually repair it, so we were really concerned.
That building's been added onto several times, and I know the 2 editions I was involved with, it was just adding on, patching on to what was already there, so.
I went there when it was first built, from the one-room schoolhouse at Minot Corner. It's been there a while.
And so have you, right? I couldn't resist.
Yeah, that was an easy one there.
So how does this compare to previous year's requests? Last year, we asked for $160,000, and we're asking for an additional $160,000 this year. So it's, you know, flat funded. We did have to cut out, you know, some of the wants items that, you know, we can really live without to get you to that number.
And one of the questions that always comes before this group is how much do you want in your CIP account? And we felt like that was a pretty healthy number. We still have about 160,000 left in this year's budget. There are projects we haven't finished yet. And so when you're thinking about the cost of the projects listed here, we don't want that to be zero and not have any contingency lines for something happening. So the towns have been really supportive of building this up a bit, and this is the number that we think, again, will keep us at that place where there's, you know, $100,000 buffer for any big catastrophe with our buildings.
And didn't we just have a big catastrophe over at Elm Street, like we lost the whole boiler system?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I can't
So it was
remember-
good that we had,
Yeah, that was a $21,000 unbudgeted item.
yeah, so.
Okay, so next week, what's our plan for next week? We'll be doing,
So next week we'll have the superintendent's office, business office. We will have adult ed. That again is a revenue-driven system for the most part, but we do have some conversations we want to have about adult ed because the town does chip in some money towards adult ed. And
we'll have an overview printout next week,
Yes.
sort of a summary
Yep.
printout.
So we'll go over the, I was going to say, an improvement of instruction line, which we haven't had before, which will cover some money to do some curriculum work, our assessment money, English language learners, gifted and talented. They're all in the improvement of instruction line, which is a new cost center for us. So again, you'll see a shift from some other places into that line. So I'll be presenting that part of the budget, and then once all of those are done, again, those are smaller ones compared to some of the ones we've had, but when those lines are done, that will give us time to look at the big picture and for you to see the budget from every one of the buildings and also every one of the departments.
Do we get a chance to actually review all the line items that are going to be, people are going to be voting on prior to them actually being out there?
So that's just basically what we're talking about now, right? Because they will have systems, they will have special ed. I'm trying to remember. They have regular instruction. So are you asking us to present it to you so that you see what the line would be that would be on the warrant article?
Yeah, even the language in the warrant article, I'd like to see that, if that's something, like, we can see that
You're
stuff. on the-
talking about this?
Yes, exactly.
Would we have that for the second meeting? So
For the
next
second-
week will be the
That's
present.
once we've decided.
Finalized everything.
Yes.
And then
So-
somebody drafts up this language.
That's
Right.
all state-driven.
But
It
the.
is, okay.
So you'll see, yeah, so
Brilliant.
what you'll do is next week you'll see the last presentations and we will share the overview. You'll be able to take that away, think about it, look at the presentations again, do any background work you want to do, and then we'll come in for our last meeting and we will work on what is the final proposed budget that we want to send to the school board to consider. And then, of course, we're an advisory committee, so the school board is the one that decides what the final budget is that goes to voters. So they will be looking to us to give them our opinion on what the budget should look like and should contain for a final budget. And the board meeting is so we do that on Thursday night. Is it
It's-
a board meeting the next?
And the April board meeting.
April board.
And then we go to the 3 towns all in 1 week, the last week in April, and do a presentation based on that proposed budget. And usually we come back and do some tweaks based on the feedback that we get at those meetings.
Yeah, the last two years, I believe we've had increases. We've had townspeople say, we want you to add another bus in. Or 1 year, they said, we want more in your CIP account. Last year, we got feedback on the foreign language position. They wanted us to have a foreign language position, so we came back and made some adjustments. So when we go to those town presentations, depending on what feedback we get and how the participants respond to the information we share with them, that can then impact the board as well.
Right, and I think last year when we listened to the few things that they felt we should add, we were also listening to this committee that said this is the figure that we think our towns can support. So what we decided was to take more of our fund balance. We looked at our fund balance and said, we think we can do both. We think we can put in our foreign language teacher and fund it by putting in more fund balance and stay within what this committee thought that taxpayers could withstand.
And I haven't heard any positive information about the state and their debate over the $23 million request for additional state funding. But I know that, or I'm hoping that we will have that information, maybe by May, and be able to have our budget reflecting actual costs coming into education, because again, like in the past, if even half of that money comes in, it will reduce our local taxes pretty significantly. And by building a budget based on what we need, there's not this, we get more money, what else are we going to spend? It's really, okay, now this money can go to mitigate taxes because our budget represents our needs.
And after next week's meeting, we should be able to have some of those discussions in terms of tax impact too.
Yes.
Because we'll know some bottom line numbers that we have to work with.
Yes.
So that will be part of that last meeting, is also looking at some tax impact.
Is this meeting open to all the school board members?
It is. Yep.
So I'm assuming there's nobody in here from Minot School Board.
Yes.
Tina.
Oh,
Tina
you
is.
are. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I missed that when we were going around the room.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we try to have
Yeah.
representation from every
everybody.
town, and also from our school board, but also from our community members, so that they can then go back and people in the community are asking questions, they know who they can ask that's living right in their town. And of course, the school board represents all of our children in all of our towns, but they certainly have maybe better access to the people that live in their own town.
Excuse me?
I was just
So if nobody has any more questions,
I
we'll
don't.
see you next week. Same time, same place.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Alice.